You ever see a big murder lizard and decide to make them your entire personality despite them not actually being much of a character? Hi, welcome to the Unpacking Dark Urge video. In case it needs to be said, major spoilers for the game, its finale, and the new endings that patch 7 added. Specifically, the Dark Urge endings. This is a major Dark Urge spoilers, so if you haven't played the Dark Urge storyline and you want to walk in blind, this video is not safe for you. The Dark Urge is the only character that is not set in stone. There's no pre-established name for it, not entirely a pre-established look. A fully customizable origin character. However, there is a default that some will consider when discussing this character. A default Durge is pretty cool, honestly. I'm mourning the fact that this giant murder lizard is not a companion in the game. For those who need the rundown, default Durge is a cool white lizard with the sick red detailing that I honestly think kind of looks like he's got blood smeared on him, especially the way that the red detailing gets interpreted in fan art. It's very nice. He's also a sorcerer, which is wild because sorcerers are not built to be a Dark Urge and use the Slayer form. Or maybe I am bad at the game. Alright. That does not do the damage I think it should. 8 to 40 damage. And then I just do a bunch of ones. Hello? Anyway, I and many others have fallen in love with the Dark Urge. A total of around 13% of players to be exact, if I did my math right. The real stat is 15% out of the 93% of players that played a custom character, which the 93% includes Tav and Durge, with Durge being the 15% of that 93%. So, like, if I did my math right, 13% of players have played the Dark Urge. With the nature of who Durge is, an amnesiac haunted by horrors untold, players are able to impose their own lore and personality onto the character. The personality bit is also kind of true when playing as any of the other origin characters, but with Durge, it feels more like an OC than a player playing a game with a set character as the player character. However, even with everyone essentially having a different character when playing the Durge, there's still common traits and themes for the character. Backstory nuggets present in the game that tell us so much about who Durge was, and with the possibility of redemption, following the path set up for them by Ball, or defying everything and everyone in the end, there's plenty of puzzle pieces to craft a bigger picture of who Durge is, and what all of our Dark Urge OCs have in common. This video is going to be structured a little bit differently than the other Unpacking videos, as we'll be going in chronological order of Durge's life, instead of the chronological order of the events of the game. And we'll be spending more time really digging our teeth into the good and evil pathways of the game, because it changes the Dark Urge story a lot more than the other origin characters, especially now that patch 7 is out. Although you could say that for all the origin characters, like Sun God Astarion, there's something to unpack there. But without further ado, who is this haunted little guy?
My rancid blood whispers to me, kill, kill, and kill again. My ruined body yearns to reap death in this world. And when this foul urge calls, it possesses my whole being. Injured beyond repair. I know nothing besides this. I must resist the Dark Urge, lest it consume my mind. I must discover who I was and what happened to me before my twitching knife hand writes a tragedy in blood.
At some undisclosed point in the past, Durge was handcrafted by Ball, the god of murder. They weren't like the other Ball spawn, though. Instead of being sired in a more conventional reproductive process, Durge was built from a piece of Bal's dead flesh. Bal must have also thought Dragonborn were neat, or tieflings, or whatever the race of your Durge ended up being. Being crafted from the flesh of the literal god of murder, Durge is the only Bal spawn who has the dark urge woven into their bloodstream, their entire fabric of being. And that urge being the guarantee of murder, you know. The urge is something that ends up taking over and controlling Durge at different points throughout their life, and it's a really fascinating element of their story. The horror of losing control of yourself, the dread of not being able to trust yourself. Durge was not raised in the cult of Bal. Instead, they were adopted and raised by a nice couple who genuinely cared about them. From the small snippets the player learns through memories regained from casting Heal on Durge, we know that at some point, for a time being, Durge had a fairly normal childhood, raised by parents who loved them and friends in Baldur's Gate that they played with. Durge could have been a happy and well-adjusted citizen if not for the urges woven into their blood. We also learned that at some point before the age of 10, Durge had their first murder spree, killing their family and leaving a bloody heap in their cottage. That peaceful bliss was ripped away by their own uncontrollable hands. Not much else is known about Durge's life between then and when Sceleritas Fel entered the picture. Did they find their way to the cult of Bal, or did they wander around, doing their best to survive and nurse the urge? Both seem pretty likely to me, and I think this is something that is left vague for the player to insert their own backstory here. Since at the end of the day, Durge is a fully customizable little guy being gender neutral. And many players may have something in mind already, especially on their first go at dark urging. It's just angsty Tav for some of us. Once Durge reached adulthood, Sceleritas Fel was sent by Bal to help Durge reach their birthright of being Bal's chosen, and the one destined to end the world. Sceleritas Fel is the closest thing Durge canonically has to a family after slaughtering their own foster family as a child. Sceleritas Fel loves Durge, cares deeply for them, and while he doesn't raise them, he does act as a parental figure of sorts, because people no longer stop needing their parents once they become an adult. Sceleritas helps fill in the blanks here and there, mostly details on how vile and depraved Durge was in the past, how mad and far gone they used to be.
We will be reintroducing necrophilia to your schedule in no
We'll be
time.
doing what? Obligatory crime counter for the Durge: murder, disembowelment, necrophilia, cannibalism, murder, slaughter, general crimes against humanity. Okay, so Durge was a freak. Sceleritas Fel, though, loved them for all of their viciousness, but I don't think that viciousness came as naturally for Durge as some might believe. Sceleritas Fel talks about how Durge needed him, how they needed his guidance, and he doesn't seem super fazed if Durge is resistant to their nature throughout the game. Sure, he's disappointed, but he reacts as if they've been here before. This is further supported when Sceleritas Fel says the worst thing Durge has ever done was give money to a beggar, and that act of kindness has haunted Sceleritas ever since. Kindness comes naturally to Durge, doubly so if the player is doing a redeemed Durge story. One thing that has stuck out to me in regards to Durge and their vile ways is how Sceleritas Fel makes it seem like Durge couldn't function without him. The butler will stick around for as long as a Bal's chosen needs it, essentially respawning if it's killed. In contrast, Orin killed hers as soon as she got one, and it never came back. She didn't need it. Sceleritas Fel talks about how he enjoyed being killed by Durge in the past, but he's still around, obviously, so it's pretty clear that Durge does still need the butler in order to be the best Bal spawn that they can be. That's just supported by the laws of the universe. With that in mind, I do think Durge needing guidance has more to do with Durge's good-heartedness than any logistical issue that comes with being a mass murderer, especially because we know that Gortash admired Durge for their capabilities, their intelligence, their thinking abilities. While Durge was handcrafted by Ball to be the machine that brings a grisly death to the world, they also got to know the joy of a normal life with a family that cared for them. It's kind of like nature versus nurture being played out with this character. We may not know much about their childhood, but I think it's fair to say that the way that Durge was brought up before the urge took over did a lot to nurture their capacity for good. Durge can be seen in their past and in the present of the game fighting their urges. The game even tries to push you towards doing what you can to overcome them, with the Dark Urge character intro stating that they must resist, otherwise it will consume them. While Baldur's Gate 3 has no correct way to play it, I do think there's plenty to point towards Durge not being a total evil bastard, not unless the player chooses to be one. Durge had a good childhood. They knew unconditional love, and they likely felt the pain of their actions once they regained control of themselves. I believe the first time the urge came calling, the instance where they went on their first murder spree, was similar to the night that Durge kills Alfira early in Act 1. Durge is not conscious when it happens. Possessed by a dark desire, the urge compels the body to move without the soul being aware. Durge comes to, covered in the evidence of their monstrosity, their twitching knife hand sated. If you are resisting the urge, Durge is honestly equal parts horrified and terrified of what happened to Alfira, and I think it's fair to say they may have had a similar reaction to slaughtering their family. I mean, the Dark Urge intro in the character creation screen, Durge before any player interference, is scared to death of the urges within. And it's truly horrifying if you think about it. It's a form of horror to have your body essentially go against you, to feel as if you are sharing your physical form with an evil spirit of sorts, or to feel as if you are nothing more than a vessel. It's scary to not be able to trust yourself. Whether you're giving in to the urge or not, it's a horrifying thought that your body will act on its own, that you'll do things you are unaware of. The Dark Urge is terrifying, and it's a terror that the Durge has lived with for most of their life, something that the game doesn't necessarily explore, but it is still a very important aspect nonetheless. I mean, yeah, it explores the urge a little bit here and there when you interact with certain things and things happen outside of your control, like when you're interacting with the squirrel in the Druid's Grove. But beyond like little things like that, we don't really explore the effects of that kind of terrifying thing to go through on Durge. But also, I'm well aware of the fact that it is a player character, and most players don't really like to be told what they're thinking and feeling. Especially when it's not entirely necessary to the story being told. At some point in their adult life, Durge got a handle on their urges, learned to lean into the obscenities, and became the cool and calculated assassin that we know they were before the events of the game. They were truly making Sceleritas Fel proud. And it was during this era of their life where they took charge of the Ballist cult, and pledged to bring about the end of everything. During this time, Orin became a part of the picture, becoming a second-in-command of sorts, and much to Orin's dismay, Durge befriended Gortash and started working with him. Gortash and Durge were very important to one another. I made a video about their relationship already, so this video will not delve too much into the potential romantic or intimate reading of their dynamic. However, it cannot be denied that the two meant a great deal to one another. At the very least, Durge admired Gortash, so much so that they felt the need to write a prayer of forgiveness to Ball for how much they admired Gortash, and a reminder to themselves how Gortash would have to be slain by them at the end of everything, to kill him last and then themselves at the end. It honestly sounds kind of romantic in a ballist kind of way. This partnership of sorts, regardless of how you read it, is a turning point in Durge's life. We don't know anything of their social life as the Chosen of Baal, but we do know that Orin thinks working with others is dumb, and that life as an assassin trying to bring about the end of the world is probably not going to lend very well to making friends, especially friends outside of the cult. I don't know how friendly ballists are with one another. It's never explored. However, it is also this partnership with Gortash that served as the catalyst for Durge's idea to enslave an Elder Brain and use that as the tool to bring about total annihilation for Baal. The two of them together raided Mephistopheles' vault for the crown of Karsus, and after having the crown, Gortash suggested that they use the crown to control the Elder Brain below Moonrise Towers. It would be through this plan with Gortash and Ketheric Thorm that Durge would build an army of mind flayers that would help slaughter all living things in the realm, and in the end, betrayal would be inevitable, as Durge ended the lives of their companions and then finally themselves. It was a brilliant plan, a devious plan, a plan that was sure to work out. For they had the luck of the gods on their side. Baal, Bane, and Merkel would set aside their differences and work together for this common goal. That is, until it would become time to have their respective chosen betray the other two in order to enact the will of their individual gods. Although it didn't seem like Gortash ever planned on betraying the other two, he could do all the tyranny he wanted while Ketheric and or Durge did whatever Merkel or Baal wanted. The enslaved Elder Brain grew to respect Durge, willing to do their bidding. Durge was treated like a god around Moonrise, despite those there not entirely knowing who they were. Things seemed to be working out just as they needed to for Durge, and it was great. That was until Orin decided she'd had enough of Durge's foolishness. She hated the way that they worked with others, she hated the way they ran things, and she felt that she was much better suited for the job. She was jealous, and she craved the love of Baal that she thought Durge had, so she attacked. The specifics of the attack are unknown, but it's due to this attack that Durge gets a chance to choose their own way in life. A do-over, if you will. A redemption arc, if they so choose. Orin mutilated Durge, damaging their brain and sticking a mind flayer tadpole in their skull. She left Durge in a pod to die. However, this attack caused a chain of events that made the events of the game possible. Instead of dying the way Orin had intended, Durge became Patient Zero, the first ever true soul. The tadpole consumed parts of their liquidating brain, which is the cause of the amnesia during the game. But Durge did not transform into a mind flayer. They stayed themselves, in a way. Unable to really function, Durge spent their days underneath Moonrise Towers, resisting the control of the tadpole and the influence of the Elder Brain. They remained their own, but they were unable to speak and could hardly move. This is the state that Cressa the Necromancer found them in. Near dead, but still alive and still themselves. Cressa would spend days dismembering and studying Durge, cutting them open, taking them apart, exploring their insides, then stitching them back together only to repeat the process. For several days. Honestly, the body horror present in Durge's story has so much fucked up potential. Durge, a person who had been ravaged by dark desires and urges that possessed them. A person who had themselves taken away from them by a trusted member of their cult. A person who was only a shell of what they once were, now taken apart and stitched back together over and over again, tortured for days on end while all they could do was just lay there and experience it. A reminder that their body is not their own. Their existence is nothing more than an experiment, an entire person reduced to nothing more than a tool for a god. But despite it all, Durge survives, endures, presses on. They lay there on the operating table where Cressa studied them, but they would not succumb to the horrors that entrenched them. Eventually, Cressa's husband, Magtu, wanted to snap her out of this obsession that she'd developed and arranged for Durge to be sent off on a nautiloid ship. and the rest is played out in the actual game.
The blood in your head thrums and pounds. That pounding blood obscures who you are. An overwhelming loss of memory. How you ended up amidst these hellish flames is just as hidden. You have nothing in your skull, besides your name and a headache. But you are in danger.
Okay, so in terms of discussing Durge's pathway throughout the game, I'm going to be breaking it up between the redeemed storyline and the full-on embracing Baal story, and tacking on rejecting Baal but still being evil at the end. We'll be covering the redeemed story first, since I think it's more interesting. Durge wakes up on the Nautiloid. No idea who they are or how they even got there. They had nothing but a pounding headache and a yearning for gore. Every step of the way, Durge has thoughts of atrocities that they could do, ways to satiate the desires to harm and to bring an end to life. However, they do their best to shake away the thoughts and do the right thing, to resist the urges. Horrified every step of the way by things done outside of their control. The moment they slaughtered an innocent squirrel in the grove was an unjust act of cruelty. Alfira's death weighs heavy on them. What else have they done that they do not remember? There's echoes of taking pleasure in harming others, vague memories of corpses that once pleased them. Durge is now a shell of who they were before being attacked, but that shell gave room for something more genuine to grow and flourish. With the help of those around them, Durge learns to care for others, learns to indulge in the joys of helping others, a joy that had been stifled out of them and shamed by Sceleritas Fel. Kindness was a weakness before, but now Durge had the opportunity to explore the strengths of being kind. For the most part, a redeemed Durge story plays out very similarly to a good aligned Tav, especially in Act 1. Act 2 does throw some things at the wall though, promises of gifts and power if Durge slaughters Isabel, and in turn causing the death of everyone in Last Light Inn. A slap in the face if they'd been helping the tiefling refugees get this far. However, if they refuse to kill Isabel, Sceleritas Fel comes back before Durge heads into Baldur's Gate with promises of redemption. They had another chance to gain their father's favor, and all they had to do was slaughter the one they cared for the most. The love that made them weak and susceptible to falling for the sham that is caring for others. Sceleritas Fel will talk up the monster that Durge used to be, that Durge fears they are. Their dear companion lay there, unaware of the evil that looms over them. His words invoke feelings of guilt for even the idea of slaughtering their loved ones. If you are romancing Astarion, Sceleritas talks about how he's so scared of everything, except for Durge, the thing that he should be the most afraid of. A final idea that Durge ruminates on. How could they betray that trust? How could they spill the blood of the one they cared for the most? It's an impossible task. Durge can choose to slaughter their beloved, but they can also awaken them. Durge can wake up their loved one and ask for help. Spend the night restrained and watched over by the one that they love and the one that loves them. A way to keep the urge from doing something that Durge would regret. The urge takes control, and Durge turns into a feral beast that struggles against the restraints and reacts more like an animal trying to reach its prey. Durge is utterly lost, and it's a terrifying experience both for Durge and their beloved. But it's one they're able to pull through together. Durge affirms that night that depending on others and loving others is where their strength comes from. Throughout Act 2, while they're struggling to resist the urge to kill Isabel, Durge is also starting to get more puzzle pieces for who they once were. Those at Moonrise recognize them, and talk to them as if they'd spent time there before. Ketheric treats them as if they'd once caused problems, or at the very least got into mischief in Moonrise. Ketheric also calls them a mad dog, likely a reference to the urge, and whatever weird primal behavior Durge had displayed due to it. Durge can also find evidence of the Mind Flayer colony, and when doing so, they're able to communicate with the Absolute, and she's grieving. The disgrace, the betrayal. But Durge is back now. The Dark Urge has returned. She explains how she is now a slave, and how Durge used to be the crown jewel of the grand design. However, now they were a flaw. The Absolute is angry that Durge abandoned her, left her to be the slave of Gortash, Ketheric, and Orin, chosen that she does not respect, chosen she never chose. The Absolute asks Durge to come back to her, to allow her to be herself again. This is all so much to take in, to learn that Durge may have been one of the ones responsible for the evil they fight now. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to form a picture, and it's one that serves as the antithesis of who Durge is trying to be. Once Durge makes it into the Mind Flayer colony at the end of Act 2, they find evidence of their past struggle, the pod they resided in and broke out of. If Astarion is in the party, he can confirm that the blood in the pod was in fact Durge's. Irrefutable proof that they had in fact been there before. This is also when Durge finds out about the horrors that were done to them, the torture that Cressa enacted on them, and vague memories of Orin's attack start to emerge from the mutilated mess that is now Durge's brain. Not only does Durge have to grapple with the trauma that has happened to them, they also are now plagued with the notion that they had something to do with the monstrosities that are seemingly taking over the Sword Coast. This weighs heavy on them as the party makes it through to Act 3, where they are once again faced with their involvement. Meeting with Gortash is like getting the final puzzle piece for Durge. As they approach the new Archduke, they are plagued with visions that confirm their heritage. A ball spawn. The call of death that runs through their veins finally makes sense now. The desire for murder was crafted into them at their conception. I do want to note, Durge is the only ball spawn with the urge, and it's due to the very nature of how they came into existence. They're the only ball spawn that was crafted from Baal's own dead flesh and gore. The urge isn't really a thing that all ball spawn deal with. It's very unique to Durge. However, having the knowledge that Durge is a ball spawn does put a lot into perspective. With this confirmation, Durge and the rest of the party head up to Gortash's coronation. That's when the next curveball is thrown, especially for Durges who are friendly with or romancing Karlach. Gortash approaches, all smiles and warmth, to greet his old friend, his favorite assassin. So Durge was familiar with the evil tyrant taking over Baldur's Gate. The company a person keeps is reflective of who they are. If you are friends with someone who is like Gortash, then you are strangely okay with his cartoonishly evil ways. Because if you were really opposed to them, if that really upset you and bothered you, you would not think too highly of him, nor would you want someone like that in your circle. So, at the very least, Durge was willing to look the other way. At the most, Durge encourages that behavior, or at least did. But Durge doesn't have time to process all that, because Gortash is all too willing to overshare and fill in some of the gaps, confirming what Durge has started to figure out at Moonrise. Gortash is all too willing to share the plan, Durge's involvement, and extend a new alliance with an old friend. Durge now knows, without a shadow of a doubt, that this whole absolute plot is their doing. All of this is their fault. Yeah, Gortash and Ketheric were a part of it, and it does sound like Gortash may have been the one who brought up the idea of the crown in the first place. However, Durge played their part all too well, and even Astarion points out that if it weren't for Durge, he'd still be a slave to Cazador, stuck in the kennels while being tortured. Their party members place blame on Durge, and a Durge seeking redemption is likely to feel a tremendous amount of guilt for their hand in all of this turmoil, feeling that it was their fault that the party members have grown to love and care for are struggling with this tadpole problem. Although, to be fair, if it weren't for the tadpoles, these people would have never met, and we wouldn't be helping them overcome the cycles of abuse that they are all stuck in at the start of the game. A little silver lining of being infected with the Mind Flayer tadpole. A redemption-seeking dirge is now seeking to undo their wrongs. Taking down the Absolute is the least they could do after creating it in the first place. This is Durge's new goal as they work through helping their party members settle their own business while they hunt down Orin. Whether or not Durge allies with Gortash and actually keeps that allyship doesn't change anything about their story, so kill him for Karlach's sake. She deserves to have that closure before she faces down her own potential ending. Hunting down Orin takes Durge through a few familiar locations and faces. First being the murder tribunal where Sarevok awaits. Sarevok is genuinely a family member, being a descendant of Baal, making him Durge's half-sibling of sorts. And yes, that also means Orin is Durge's niece? Half-niece? Even though they think they're siblings because Orin thinks that she's a Baal spawn, directly from Baal and not from Sarevok. Messy family tree. Sarevok seems to enjoy seeing Durge at the murder tribunal and is cheering for Durge in terms of taking down Orin and reclaiming their power in the Baal cult. If Durge is seeking redemption, it doesn't make sense for them to become an unholy assassin at the murder tribunal, so instead of playing the Baalist game, they and their party slaughter the tribunal instead of killing the sacrifice, which is Detective Valeria. A lot of people choose to kill Valeria because it's an easy fight, and Valeria is bad at her job, and a lot of us just don't really like her. But speaking narratively from Durge's point of view, it does make more sense to spare her and get rid of the tribunal, even if Valeria is a shit detective. The blood toll is higher this way, but also if Durge doesn't want to become an unholy assassin, it is unavoidable. Also, Valeria is a celestial being, which means by default she should be good aligned, and for some reason the lives of those who are good are deemed as more valuable than lives of those who are evil. There's also the fact that Sarevok and the others overseeing the tribunal aren't actually alive. So, is the blood toll really higher if you're killing people who are already dead? And also, Baalists in this game get the same treatment as goblins or rats in any other fantasy setting. Unimportant creatures who seek to do harm, so killing them serves as a greater good, and it's not the same as killing any other living creature. I'm serious about this. There are so many unnamed, unimportant Baalists in Act 3 that you end up fighting that are literally just there to be cannon fodder, to provide combat for the sake of combat and leveling up. A lot of them might actually be named, but it's they're not characters, if that makes sense. The goblins that you fight have more character than a lot of these Baalist cult members. Taking the fight to Orin, Durge returns to their old home, the Baal temple where they once led things. The home of their maker, the site of their crimes. Sceleritas is awaiting them at the doors of the temple, excited to see them and eager for Durge to slay Orin and reclaim their birthright. A right that Durge is trying to run from. One difference between playing as the Dark Urge and literally anyone else is that Durge has to 1v1 Orin. No cultists chanting, no party members helping in the fight, just Orin and her raw power versus Durge and their solo strength. The confrontation is that of a jealous, younger family member flaunting her power over the one everyone else seemed to prefer. Orin taunts Durge, even morphing into them to further mock them for what she had done to them. This moment slides the last puzzle piece firmly into place. Durge was Baal's chosen, and Orin was just a subordinate. Not only was Durge an evil bastard, they were the evil bastard. But all of that was stripped away from them by Orin. Orin and Durge duel to the death. If Durge dies, Sceleritas becomes upset and calls for the death of the imposter, being Orin. He really is Durge's ride or die. However, when Durge wins, they are granted company with Baal, and this is where they are faced with a choice that will change the trajectory of their future. Embrace the urge, gain the Slayer form, and enact the Father's will, or deny Baal and face death. Be a slave to the urge for the rest of their existence, or have this one moment of individual strength and in Baal's ability to use them as a tool. A Durge that seeks redemption may be inclined to defy Baal in this very moment, accepting death for what they've done, and forcing Ball to throw out his favorite tool, stripping the god of both of his chosen. It's a scary choice, but one that feels right. Durge can atone for their wrongdoings this way, wash away the sins of their blood. But death is not the end. Withers intervenes and brings Durge back from the dead. However, they come back totally fine, better than ever actually. The dark urge that once tormented them is no longer present. It's just them in their body, and them alone. And Ball's influence cannot touch them anymore. They can finally feel at peace. Well, the peace may have to wait until the absolute is dealt with, but you get the point. The rest of a redeemed Durge who defied Ball at this point plays out basically like a normal Tav. Tie up loose ends, go fight the brain, make good choices. Durge finally gets their happy ending and can start on a path that offsets their evil deeds from the past, or settle down with their romanced companion to find peace after all that has happened. It's a very rewarding story for Durge and the player. Resisting dark desires paid off, and now they're able to be truly happy, to truly be themselves. However, if Durge does not defy Ball in the temple, but still decides to save the world for the greater good at the end, destroying the brain and denying Ball the chance of world domination and destruction, things do not play out as smoothly for them.
Your thoughts wander from your companions and everything you endured to your own piteous fate. If only you defied your father when you had the chance and freed yourself of your dark desires. But it's too late now. Your destiny is set. Your very blood shall clot with the urge, and that hungry desire will consume you. You may have freed the world from the control of the nether brain, but you are not yet free. Your father is angry. What foul punishment awaits you now that you have rejected him? And just like that, it's over. Whatever's left of you is subsumed by the overwhelming strength of your desires. Blood, 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 blood.
Sure, Baldur's Gate is saved. The party members get to move on with their lives. But Durge becomes a shell of who they are, forever stuck in this frenzy. A vessel that has lost its mind to the urges. They can either turn themselves into jail where they assumedly spend the rest of their days succumbing to the madness, or they roam free, forced to sire children across the land, creating more ball spawn and totally out of control of themselves. Ball took over, and whatever person Durge was is long gone. They're now just a baby-making, life-taking machine. Their humanity has been completely stripped away. They show up to the epilogue party, twitching and in a crazed daze. Durge was not invited, but they showed up seeking the comforts of a familiar location. They're no longer a person, but instead some poor feral creature who is held captive by the dark urge. Their consciousness is trapped within as the urge commits atrocities. It's implied that Durge sets out to slaughter their old companions. The urge has taken everything from them. This becomes the price for doing the right thing in the end. The price of defying the father in the last moment. And honestly, it's a fate worse than death. To have yourself stolen, to be trapped within while you watch yourself enter a routine of horrors, to have your own urges destroy those who meant the most to you. A Durge in this ending has their autonomy stripped away from them, their ability to decide whether or not they want to breed. It's left up to your interpretation as to how willing your Durge is to participate in the conception of a child, all of the processes of that. But it just, when I got to that ending, because I was curious, so I did see what that was like to play it out for my Durge, and it was haunting. And it's probably the reason most people who play Redeemed Dark Urge path choose to face death at the temple to defy Baal. Especially those of us who knew that ending was coming up or had seen it before. From here on out, all of our Durges are not making the choice to end up there. But I also believe that there is an inherent goodness to Durge, despite their origins and pre-tadpole path. Sceleritas Fel says himself that Durge struggles to conduct themselves without him. Durge has shown acts of kindness even when being their worst self. The goodness that Durge was taught in childhood, whatever kindness lays within their core self, was never fully stomped out by Baal, and being attacked by Orin and getting the tadpole was the best thing that has ever happened to Durge. The act of cruelty brought them a second chance, not burdened with the years of Baal's influence on their mind. Sure, they still had the urge, but this time Durge had a fighting chance, and people around them who cared about them as a person, not as Baal's tool. Yeah, I do believe Sceleritas Fel cares about Durge as a person, but he also pushes Durge to be their worst, while the other people Durge comes to know and care for throughout the game would encourage their best. Why be such a terrible person who brings about suffering when Durge can live a peaceful and happy life with Shadowheart, Astarion, Will, Lae'zel, Karlach, Gale, Halsin, or anyone else they may encounter and grow to love? Durge was given a second chance to embrace the lighter things in life and to truly become their own person. And it's a beautiful story. They're reclaiming themselves for themselves. And I love that. Oh, we're gonna Dark Urge it up all over the Sword Coast. But what if you want to enact the will of the Father? Revel in the depravity and become consumed by the urges. The evil path of Baldur's Gate does cut out a lot of content. You miss out on all the stuff going on with the tieflings, you lose Will and Karlach and their respective companion stories. You lose out on curing the Shadow Curse, and there are many other things that you'll end up missing. The only thing an evil playthrough adds is getting to know Minthara. There's no side story for the goblins, and while Minthara is great, she doesn't add a whole lot in comparison to what you lose. My Evil Dark Urge run was completed in just 54 hours, and that's including a lot of talking to my Twitch chat and not actually playing, compared to the usual 65 to 70 hours it takes me to finish a good aligned playthrough. Evil runs are not for the weak, and honestly, not even worth it unless you just need a change of pace, want to experience a different side of the story, or want to romance Minthara and do a making everyone worse storyline. However, doing an evil run as Dark Urge does add a little bit more implicit storytelling. An evil Durge that gives into their urges is an enthusiastic tool for Baal, a willing component in the plan, and one that gives into their nature as Baal's handcrafted killing machine. They spend the entirety of the game making decisions that bring the most carnage, and reveling in their depravity. Sceleritas Fel is proud of them though, and you know what? That makes it all worth it. Playing an evil run really made me love this little guy. Act 1 does not have many Durge-specific things going on. There's no Durge-specific evil decision that's going to be unique, other than, like, hacking Gale's hand off. Our favorite wizard, stranded in a rock and in need of assistance, Durge strolls up, curious about the strange portal and the strange man inside. That's when the urge hits. Fantasize about severing the hand and enjoying the screams of pain and splatter of blood. But it's just a fantasy, right? Thinking about it, and then Durge can make their decision. Durge is not in control of their actions. A simple fantasy is nothing more than a way to cope with the urge and how the urge may conflict with whatever is left of Durge's morality. They come out of their daydream with real blood on their real hands. and a severed hand in their pockets. Gale has been slaughtered. Rest in peace. For a redeemed dirge, this would be a wake-up call, a reminder that they need to be careful and figure out how to handle the urges. But for a dirge who's giving their all to the urge, this is a sweet little treat, a little act of cruelty to show their power. This sets the tone for how dirge will treat others moving forward, and lets the players know that fantasies are not safe to linger on if they do not wish to indulge in the depravities, and is a bit of foreshadowing to how dirge will lose themselves in future encounters, much like how they do when killing Alfira. Another act of cruelty that satiated the urge, and an evil dirge would revel in it and enjoy, with their only regret being that they didn't remember the act of slaughtering that sweet, precious bard. We're just having such a good time. This is not gonna go down in top 10 screenshots taken before disaster. Oh no.
You open your eyes with a lurch, and you are not in your bed.
But I am not.
You stand above a body which is in a state of gore nearly beyond recognition.
Rest in peace,
The body of
Alfira.
that brave girl who earnestly swore to devote her life to your cause.
The main path divide in Act 1 between good and evil stories is the decision to betray the Grove when speaking to Minthara, and holding up that promise when Minthara attacks the Grove with her horde of goblins, slaughtering innocent tieflings that can hardly defend themselves, and ending the lives of the druids that inhabit the Grove. Players who take this path do end up missing out on Halsin, and this decision usually results in his death. Will also leave the party or die in the Grove fight if you hadn't recruited him, and Karlach will leave as well, or attack you on sight if you hadn't recruited her yet. I know there are bugs to avoid this, but that's because it's not intended to be played out that way. I'm just gonna ignore that you can bug the game for the sake of this. This act of cruelty is not something that Sceleritas has asked Durge to do, nor is it anything that Sceleritas necessarily praises and rewards them for. But it is something that most players who are wanting to do an evil run will do, so I'm including it, even though it's not a Durge-specific thing. A Durge that would betray the Grove, given to their darkest desires, is a Durge that would do whatever they could to feed the darkness within them, and proudly walk the path Ball set out for them. They feel no remorse for their actions. But that's by design. Durge was handcrafted by Ball to be this way, and any good follower of Ball would know that killing and causing harm is an ecstatic experience. In the Underdark, there's a scroll called the Ecstasy of Murder that describes a prayer Ballist can say to have the Dark Lord's disgrace find its course in their body. And it sounds to me like a killer can essentially get off on killing. And it's like, it's a thing. The Ballists are eroticizing violence and murder. Of course they would. Of course they would. Who else? For Durge, these misdeeds are accompanied with very strong, positive feelings. What a freak. With this in mind, it makes sense as to why Durge would overlook whatever fear they felt upon awakening with no clue of who they are, and really delve into their urges. Let these desires overtake them and stamp out any ounce of morality that may have been hidden within. When their own body reinforces that doing so is a good thing, why expend the effort to fight their nature? So they kill. They bring carnage everywhere they go, and eventually stumble their way into the shadow-cursed lands of Act 2, where they're met with the goblins they helped, and Karnas, a Drider who leads them to Moonrise. Without Halsin around to instruct Durge to go through the Underdark, it narratively makes more sense for them to enter through the mountain pass and follow Minthara's instructions for how to move forward, although most of us are hitting up both locations for the XP and just the vibes. Durge is brought to Moonrise first, where Minthara is being sentenced for her crime of failure. Honestly, saving Minthara is an act of kindness that a lot of players will indulge in on their evil runs, because she oftentimes is part of why we're doing an evil run in the first place. It's to get to have her around and romance her, or just become besties with the pretty evil paladin lady. But also, Durge knows firsthand the power and zealousness that Minthara is capable of. We also know the reason she failed the mission is because she essentially had bad info. The Druid's Grove never held the artifact. Durge's party has had it the whole time, and it was in Durge's best interest that Minthara failed the mission. Perhaps it's a moment of guilt for knowing it was their own actions that put Minthara in this situation. Perhaps it's a realization that Minthara would be much more valuable alive, working as an ally, than left to the whims of the absolute cult. Or maybe it's lust after the intimacy Durge may have shared with Minthara at the Goblin Party after raiding the Grove. I guess that depends on the personality of your version of Durge. Of course, not all Durges will save Minthara, just another moment of standing back and not caring for others. This exact plot point doesn't really change too much for Durge's story. The only thing Minthara really adds is that she wholeheartedly supports Durge and encourages them to make the more evil choices in the end. She is the only companion, aside from Ascended Astarion, specifically Ascended Astarion, that encourages Durge to take over the Absolute in the end. She is the only one that is just evil, regardless of how you play the game. And good for her, she knows what she wants. She's someone in Durge's corner regardless of what they choose to do, though. And she's enthusiastic about the idea of taking over the Absolute, which, if you're an evil Durge, that's probably what you're going to end up doing, so she's fun to have around. Regardless of what Durge decides to do in the situation with Minthara, though, they're given the task to set out to explore the Shadow-Cursed lands, where they will eventually encounter Last Light Inn. At the end, there's another true soul who's infiltrated the Harpers, Marcus. He'll vouch for you in place of Maul, who is most likely dead at this point if you're playing an evil run. With Jaheira's trust hesitantly gained, Durge is prompted to seek out Isabel for a blessing to help fight against the Shadow Curse. However, Marcus has a mission to bring Isabel to Moonrise. Alive, specifically alive. A battle breaks out, and a Durge that's indulging in the urges will either have Isabel die or be kidnapped here, or will protect her only to have Sceleritas come to them with a request to kill the Darling Moon Maiden, therefore condemning the whole inn to death via the Shadow Curse anyway. However Isabel meets her grim fate doesn't matter in terms of embracing the urge, and Sceleritas will meet Durge in camp one night and bestow upon them a great gift from Baal, the Slayer form, a form granted to the most dedicated of Baal spawn. It's kind of funny how the companions will overhear people at Moonrise say weird things to Durge and literally watch Durge turn into the Slayer and still act surprised that they're a Baal spawn. When walking the evil path, Durge continues to bring death everywhere they go, causing the deaths of all those at Last Light, carrying that carnage to Moonrise, slaughtering anyone who gets in their way. Durge is a force to be reckoned with. And Durge is also most likely pushing all their allies to be their worst selves, getting DJ Shart or Dark Justiciar Shadowheart. That's the main evil choice you can make regarding companions in Act 2. As Durge kills their way through Act 3, they're finally given information about their past. They learn that they were a Baal spawn, they learn they're part of the plan via Gortash. However, an embracing the urges Durge would not be horrified at their hand in things. They're proud of what they've done in the past and seek revenge for what Orin took from them. The power that is rightfully theirs is just within reach. All they must do is gain entrance to the Temple of Baal, their old home, and end their slaughter kin. So Orin will actually appear to any player a few times in early Act 3, and she soon makes it known that she fully intends to fight the player. She shares that Baal wants her to spill your blood for him, and for Durge, that fight has to be a one-on-one duel to prove who is the most worthy of being Bal's chosen. In order to do this 1v1, Durge must first find their way to the murder tribunal, where they're met face-to-face with Sarevok, who is happy to see them return. Durge is encouraged to become an unholy assassin, killing the Hollyphant Valeria as tribute to Bal, and a show of how far the aspiring assassin is willing to go in the name of Bal. It's after this encounter that Durge gains the necessary information and tools to enter the Temple of Bal, where they will finally face Orin in a duel to the death. The encounter plays out the same regardless of how Durge has been behaving throughout the game, the only difference being that if Durge has the Slayer form, they can essentially flaunt it. And when you flaunt the Slayer form, Orin fights you in her human form, although her human form hits pretty damn hard as well. I have heard, though, that if you take certain dialogue paths, the 1v1 can be a Slayer versus Slayer. I initially thought if you had the Slayer form, Orin could not have the Slayer form. But that, I guess, is not true, because I've heard people talk about Slayer versus Slayer. That must be wild. Just as with the redeemed Durge, it's the moments after slaying Orin that define the future. The moment where Bal reaches out and welcomes Durge back as his chosen. The tool that will bring about the end of the world in a bloody show.
Child of slaughter, I come to give you your inheritance. I have a gift for you, child. You will use it to lacerate this world.
A gift from your god, your father, an offering of his affection for you, or confirmation that he owns you.
My slayer, you will grow stronger, crueler, the prime incarnation of murder. My chosen, my slayer, violence incarnate. You will become a testament in blood. Go, child of Baal. Claim the crown of Karsus. Control the Absolute. And command a horde fit to butcher this world in my name.
Sworn to the will of the Father, Durge continues on their mission to fight the Absolute. However, instead of righting their wrongs, they betray everyone who's ever trusted them along this journey, ruthlessly stabbing the Emperor or Orpheus or Karlach if you're a monster. One of my friends has literally done that. And taking the stones for themselves, taking control of the brain. Not ending this horror, but taking ownership of the hardship that the Netherbrain is inflicting on others. Taking on the Absolute in Bal's name isn't so much about Durge doing something evil for themselves or the sake of being evil. Instead, it is something that is done for Bal, to make their father proud, a point that is brought up by the narrator when Durge gets a vision of the red future that awaits them.
As you think upon the resplendent deaths to come, Father sends a premonition of your red radiant destiny. You are the end, the last creature living, with all else felled by your hand. Alone amidst their gall at the close of eternity. Then, and only then, Father will be proud.
Finally, their father will be proud. It's that wording here that I feel puts Durge in a very similar position to Orin. Both were seeking the love of Bal, seeking to prove themselves and seeking Bal's approval and pride. Did Durge fight against their seemingly good nature and wallow in their vileness because it was fun? and they didn't want to fight the urges? Or did they do it to chase the parental love that they lacked? When Durge continues to work for Ball, Sceleritas Fel hangs out at camp, and he treats Durge like his own kid. He's proud of Durge and all of their misdeeds. He cares for them deeply and is honestly a very heartwarming silver lining to an Evil Durge run. Sceleritas will offer advice, he'll talk to you about your romance options, but this cheerfully grim father figure is not enough for Durge. They'll always be seeking the approval of Ball, their true father. It's why they write a prayer of forgiveness for admiring Gortash. It's why they devote themselves to the plan of the Absolute. It's why they kill without a second thought. It's why they accept that their love is doomed by the narrative, either killing their romanced companion right on top of the brain or warning them to run until the day that would inevitably come. It doesn't excuse anything Durge has done, but it does put a tragic twist on it. Durge would sacrifice anything to make Ball proud, even themselves. What if Durge defied Ball and still went the evil route at the end of the game, taking over the Absolute in their own name, owning their misdeeds for no one but themselves, ridding themselves of the dark urge only to continue down the path of evil that the urges sent them on in the first place? This version of events reminds me a bit of Saravok's story, a Ball spawn who sought to overthrow Ball, becoming the new god of murder. Durge doesn't necessarily aim to overthrow Ball, but the parallels are there for me. Defying their maker and taking over the Absolute, the very thing they plan to do in Ball's name, but instead of using their power to create an army to bring the world to a bloody end for Ball, Durge becomes like unto a god themselves. Their darkest dreams are now possible. At this point, Durge is more like a Tav, from what I can tell, in terms of evil endings and how things play out. But the idea that Durge, still intent on doing all the bad things that would make Ball proud, wanted to take their life into their own hands and be their own person can say a lot. They didn't want to work for Ball anymore. They didn't want to feel like a slave to the urges, to Ball's influence. While their motivations for the betrayal may be different to Saravok's aspirations, both Ball spawn sought to take matters into their own hands. And I think that's interesting, and that also kind of parallels a redeemed Durge, wanting to free themselves of the urges and be their own person. Durge, regardless of how the story is played out, is nothing but a prisoner in their body, at the mercy of the dark urges that course through their veins. They can choose to resist it, or they can choose to indulge and make the most of it. But that does not change the fact that they were not created to be a person. Durge's story is tragic and also fits into the themes of the cycles of abuse that are present throughout literally every aspect of this game. Only in Durge's case, it's not exactly traditional abuse, but more so seeking to overcome the misfortune and misdeeds that were etched into you. Either that or become the monster you were raised to be. Become more than the sins of the father or embrace the sins of the father. Also, one thing that I cannot stop thinking about that didn't really fit anywhere else into the script, if you don't play as the Dark Urge, you can actually find their body in Orin's room, dead on the ground. Durge either makes it onto that nautiloid and becomes a part of the story through the player, or they're doomed by Orin's blades at some point after their time spent in the Mind Flayer colony. Durge is so doomed by the narrative. Follow Ball and end up dead, or defy Ball and end up losing themselves to the urges. Death is their only escape from being a toy to the Dreadlord. And it's only through death that Durge is able to become their own person, letting their old self die and paving the way for their true self to blossom. And honestly, healing trauma can feel a lot like that. Letting go of old, perhaps even toxic habits and creating a space for a better, healthier version of yourself to thrive. Or healing your inner child, whatever that journey looks like for you. Durge's story is one of healing, of overcoming, of creating their own person outside of the things that were built to define them. Or embracing what was built to define them and forever seeking the love and approval of a god that doesn't really care about them beyond the usefulness that they can be as a tool. Durge mirrors a lot of the other companion stories in very similar ways, and also low-key kind of shares a little bit of similarities with Ketheric in terms of just being a tool for gods, but like that's kind of their only similarity. Durge is a character that I will forever wish was a companion in the game. Maybe Astarion would have some more serious competition than he already does for me. I don't think I have anything else to say about Durge. I feel like I summed it up pretty well in my 14-page script. Was this 14 pages? How many pages? 15-page script. My bad. But anyway, that's been my long-awaited Unpacking the Dark Urge video. And I think with that, we have unpacked every major character in Baldur's Gate, aside from Tav. I'm not unpacking Tav. We all have very different Tavs. There's not really a through line, like with Dark Urge. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, for being very patient with me as we all waited for patch 7 to come out, and then as you guys waited for me to finish the script and actually record and edit the video. I will probably make other Baldur's Gate videos in the future, but I'm gonna be so real. We're slowing down a lot on Baldur's Gate. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about the game. Sorry. I know people wanted me to talk about some of the more minor characters like Raphael or Roland, and while I think that could be fun, I don't think that's gonna be a whole video. Maybe in the future I'll do a just a video about the different NPCs and why we all love them. That's an idea I've been like simmering for a while. I haven't started cooking it yet, but yeah, I think we're pretty much done with Baldur's Gate videos on this channel, aside from like maybe a couple things here and there. So thank you guys so much for going on this journey with this game for me. If you guys are only here for Baldur's Gate videos, I totally get that. But if you are willing to stick around and explore anime with me and other forms of media that I like and will grow to like in the future, greatly appreciated. I know I'm going to be playing the Dragon Age game soon, and I know a lot of Baldur's Gate fans are fans of Dragon Age. I'm not saying that I'm going to make videos about Dragon Age, but I will be streaming myself playing Dragon Age. And if I have thoughts, if I really want to chew on Dragon Age, there might be Dragon Age character videos in the future. I'm not going to promise anything yet because I haven't started the games yet. But given my track record and the fact that people have already asked me if I want to make Dragon Age videos, maybe. That's all I'll say for now. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all in my next video, whatever that may be. I'm leaning towards the next installment of the Black Butler deep dives for the like 4 of you that like Baldur's Gate and Black Butler. There you go. So we'll see. Anyway, I've been yapping too much. I love the Dark Urge. I love all of the urges. I don't love all of the urges. I just really like the Dark Urge. I think that's a cool lizard. Anyway, bye!